President Trump has again criticised the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, for his response to the war with Iran. Speaking from the Oval Office in the last hour, Donald Trump said he had thought of the UK as the Rolls-Royce of allies, but he said that he had been disappointed by the lack of support. It came after Sir Keir Starmer insisted today that the UK would not be drawn into the wider war. Our political editor, Chris Mason, reports.
A war now into its third week, with consequences both in the Middle East and domestically, and potentially long-lasting. And this is a new front line, the Strait of Hormuz. This bend in the sea between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman is a key artery for energy, and right now it's too dangerous for very much to be transported through it. The impact of this is already biting at home, particularly for those reliant on heating oil. And so the Prime Minister has set out, for the first time since the war began, targeted support to try to help.
I'm announcing immediate support for vulnerable heating oil customers today, providing £53 million for those households that are most exposed.
This will be delivered via local councils in England. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, it's being allocated directly to the devolved governments. But what about the war itself and the UK's involvement?
While taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. I want to see an end to this war as quickly as possible, because the longer it goes on, the more dangerous the situation becomes.
What kind of bread is this? What is it called?
The Conservative leader had bread in a basket at a bakery in Barnet in North London today, with the Prime Minister accusing her and Reform UK of changing their minds about how involved Britain ought to have been at the beginning of the conflict. And then there's the question of what to do now.
Should we be sending British Navy ships to the Strait of Hormuz, as President Trump is calling for?
Well, the Prime Minister will have far more detailed security briefings than I have access to, but I do think we need to start from first principles. Britain has protected freedom of navigation for centuries. However, I'm quite worried about the planning.
No one wants war, but you should stand strong with your allies, and if they ask to use your bases, then you say yes.
Well, he's right to tell Trump that he's not going to go at his orders. Trump started this illegal war that's caused the problem in the first place. But there is the national interest and the global interest to make sure that the oil flows.
And yes, President Trump now wants further help in keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, but the UK is not committing to sending Royal Navy ships. Listen to this, the President publicly calling on Sir Keir Starmer to be more decisive.
Prime Minister of UK, United Kingdom, yesterday told me, I'm meeting with my team to make a determination. I said, you don't need to meet it with the team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make your own. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us or to send some boats?
And having said it once this afternoon, he said it again this evening.
The UK, which we sort of considered the Rolls-Royce of allies, right? Wouldn't you say? They were the oldest and they were going to be there. And I say it would be really helpful if you'd send over a couple of ships, and if you have some minesweepers, which they do, it'd be very helpful. And the Prime Minister is a nice man. I think he's a very nice guy. He says, well, I'd like to ask my team.
So what is the UK willing to do? I asked that exact question of the Prime Minister this morning, before those remarks from the President we've just heard. You say the UK won't be drawn into the wider war, but you're willing to be part of what you described as a viable collective plan to keep the Straits of Hormuz open. What is the UK willing to do in specific terms?
We've been discussing this with partners, including European partners, Gulf partners and the US. We need to look at the options. We've already got autonomous mine hunting systems in the regions.
And would he consider further support for families here facing eye-watering fuel bills?
I'm not going to stand here and pretend to you that we all know what the situation will be in the 3 or 6 months' time. We don't.
In other words, the Prime Minister, like the rest of us, doesn't know how or when this war will end and with what consequence between now and then. Chris Mason, BBC News.
The Strait of Hormuz is one of the busiest shipping channels in the world. 20% of the world's oil supplies pass through the narrow and strategically important waterway. That's about 20 million barrels of oil every single day. But now it's been all but closed by Iran. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale reports on how Iran is threatening the long-term stability of the world economy.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard have been rehearsing how they'll attack foreign warships for years, near the Strait of Hormuz, which they've long considered theirs. They've been preparing to block it, hidden underground columns of small attack and mine-laying vessels ready and waiting. And then this warning to international shipping.
Every navigating from Strait of Hormuz is banned from now on.
The US has been targeting Iran's navy and its mine-laying vessels. President Trump today said much has been destroyed. But has it all?
We're hammering their capacity to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz with more than 30 mine-laying ships destroyed. We hit, to the best of our knowledge, all of their mine-laying ships. Now they can put them on other types of ships, I guess, and drop them in.
Iran's produced thousands of mines detonated remotely by contact, sound or vibration. They include drifting mines floating near the surface, mines anchored to the seabed, others ready to detonate from the ocean floor, and limpet mines placed on a vessel. Enough to deter most navies from helping.
We have a live and active surface threat, whether that's fast attack craft or uncrewed surface vessels, and we have a live subsurface threat, whether that's mini submarines or mines. You put all those together, this is a very high-risk environment, and not too many of us have ships that are really capable of operating in that environment, even if we wanted to.
Until recently, both the US and Britain had a fleet of small crude mine hunters stationed in Bahrain for this specific mission, but not anymore. They've been retired in favour of autonomous systems like this to detect and destroy mines, as yet not tested in battle. The Defence Secretary says some of these systems have now been sent to the region, but it still requires a crewed mothership to operate the surface and subsurface drones. President Trump's warned it'll be bad for NATO if it doesn't help keep the Strait of Hormuz open. But for now, few of America's allies seem willing to put their ships in harm's way. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
The Israeli military says it has begun a new wide-scale wave of strikes targeting infrastructure in Iran. This map shows US-Israeli strikes on the country since the start of the conflict. Today, a plume of smoke was seen rising from above an area in northern Tehran. More than 1,300 people have been killed since the start of the conflict, according to the Iranian Red Crescent. More than 3 million Iranians have been temporarily displaced, according to the UNHCR. Iran has continued to launch strikes around the Gulf, including at Saudi Arabia, which says it shot down 60 projectiles overnight. The United Arab Emirates has borne the brunt of the attacks so far. In Fujairah, a fire broke out, as you can see from this satellite image, after a drone strike on one of the largest oil storage facilities in the region. In Dubai, flights were temporarily suspended today after a fire broke out near the airport after a drone strike. It's the third such strike near Dubai Airport, the world's busiest for international passengers. In Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE, a rocket attack on a car killed a Palestinian national on the outskirts of the city, according to the city's media office. Well, the oil crisis is already being felt here in the UK. Wholesale oil prices have been rocketing during the Iran war, with knock-on price rises for UK consumers for fuel, most notably heating oil. The price of Brent crude oil is used as an international benchmark. It's gone up from around $73 a barrel at the end of February to over $100. Well, I'm joined now by our political editor, Chris Mason, and our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. And Chris, we saw in your report President Trump speaking just a short time ago. He has singled out the Prime Minister 3 times in the past 24 hours. The Rolls-Royce of allies, no more, it seems.
It's really quite striking, isn't it? I mean, look, we've long known that this is a president who doesn't exactly do subtlety, but the way he is doubling down and repeating his critique of the UK and the Prime Minister, sometimes in these long news conferences where he hasn't even been asked specifically about the UK, but still mentions the Prime Minister, and then he's using words that are designed to travel, are designed to end up on front pages all over the place, that Rolls-Royce line in particular. Now, look, clearly this is awkward for the Prime Minister, but I don't think it is necessarily wholeheartedly negative. He believes that he's made the right call. He makes parallels repeatedly with the Iraq War of a couple of decades ago. He did the same again this morning, and he believes he's got public opinion on his side. And it's worth unpacking a little bit what the president says. I hear from folk in Whitehall that they think some of his remarks and his observations are garbled relative to the conversations that they themselves have been privy to. I hear repeatedly the Prime Minister trying to make a virtue of what he sees as subtlety and nuance and presenting that as a strength and acknowledging uncertainty about where the conflict goes. And on a factual basis, I'm told that there's never been a formal request nor offer for aircraft carriers. I also hear from this side of the Atlantic that these references the president was making to the team when he was talking about the Prime Minister, that what the Prime Minister was attempting to articulate was a sense of what the military and what the UK's allies might collectively be able to do as a team, as opposed to his ability or otherwise to act decisively. Nonetheless, that next face-to-face meeting between the Prime Minister and the President will be quite the spectacle.
Indeed. Jeremy, we have no idea how much longer this war could go on, but what it is doing, and we are seeing it, is that it is reshaping things very dramatically before our eyes.
Yes, and it's only week 3, and we don't know where it's going to end. Wars often act as catalysts, speeding up changes that were probably going to happen anyway, but then they get this turbo boost behind them. Excuse me. So if you look at the Gulf, first of all, and we're seeing all the damage and those pictures coming out of it, loads more fires, those Gulf countries have had serious differences between each other, amongst each other. But now I think, and this is what I'm hearing, is that there's a sense now that they're going to have to reassess. Yes, of course, they will keep close to America as much as they can. But the word I'm hearing is things like diversify. We need to diversify our alliances, because where has this alliance with America actually got us? How have they protected us? Where does this security alliance work? And of course, always waiting in the wings, China has shown a lot of interest in the Gulf in the past. The transatlantic alliance, we've been hearing quite a bit of it from Chris, and stronger language coming from the Europeans, from the EU, from the Germans. Boris Pistorius, the defence minister, this is not our war, we didn't start it. You know, the split is back in a big way. And I think that now that they've decided, they've concluded that appeasing Trump doesn't work, it makes it easier to say no. And one more thing, Sophie, and that is Iran itself. It's been known for a long time that the Strait of Hormuz is a choke point in the world. But the conventional wisdom always was that the Iranians would not try and block it because they need it too. But actually, I think they're being shown now that however weak they get, as long as the regime is still there, survival is, of course, their absolute priority. They've got this very potent weapon, and there aren't that many answers thus far about how to deal with it.
Jeremy Byrne, Chris Mason, thank you both.